There are moments in life when direction disappears. The old motivations no longer move you, the future feels uncertain, and the path that once seemed clear dissolves into confusion. This feeling of being lost is not a failure of life, it is a signal. When the familiar structures fall away, something deeper is trying to emerge. The mind resists this space because it demands certainty, yet life itself unfolds through uncertainty. What feels like disorientation is often the psyche reorganizing itself at a deeper level. When meaning collapses, we instinctively try to force answers. We search for signs, reassurance, or control, believing clarity must come from immediate understanding, but true alignment rarely arrives through force. It arises when you allow the tension of not knowing to exist without panic. In this suspended state, life begins to speak in subtler ways, through intuition, patterns, and quiet inner shifts that cannot be rushed. Trusting the universe does not mean passive waiting or blind belief. It means recognizing that life has an intelligence beyond conscious planning. Every crisis carries information. Every delay is shaping awareness. When something ends or falls apart, it is often because it no longer fits the person you are becoming. The loss of direction is the clearing of space, not the absence of purpose. The more you try to control outcomes, the more fragmented you feel. Control is the ego's attempt to protect itself from transformation. Trust begins when you stop demanding life to explain itself on your timeline. In this surrender, resistance softens and energy that was trapped in fear becomes available for growth. You begin to sense that even confusion has a direction. Periods of darkness are not punishments, they are initiations. In these phases, the outer world offers fewer answers so that inner truth can surface. What you discover in stillness becomes the foundation of the next chapter. Meaning does not appear fully formed. It reveals itself step by step as you move forward without guarantees. When you trust the universe while feeling lost, you are not abandoning reason. You are honoring a deeper order. Life is not working against you. It is working through you. And when the time is right, clarity returns, not as certainty but as quiet confidence that you are exactly where you need to be. Feeling lost is often misunderstood as a sign that something has gone wrong, that you have failed to plan correctly or lacked the strength to move forward. In reality, this sensation usually appears when old inner structures can no longer support who you are becoming. The roles, beliefs, ambitions, and identities that once gave you direction begin to lose their meaning, not because they were wrong, but because they have completed their purpose. When this happens, the mind experiences disorientation, yet beneath that confusion, a deeper process is unfolding. The psyche is reorganizing itself, shedding outdated patterns so that a more authentic orientation can emerge. This state feels uncomfortable because certainty dissolves before new meaning is formed, leaving a temporary void that the mind labels as failure. Inner transformation rarely announces itself with clarity or confidence. It often begins with a sense of emptiness, fatigue, or restlessness, as if the inner compass has stopped working. This is not a breakdown but a necessary pause. When familiar motivations disappear, life is inviting you to question what truly belongs to you and what you have been carrying out of habit, expectation, or fear. Feeling lost strips away borrowed identities and exposes the raw self beneath them. It forces an encounter with unanswered questions that cannot be resolved through logic alone. In this space, you are no longer distracted by false certainty, and deeper truths have room to surface. The discomfort of being lost comes from resistance. The mind wants immediate direction, clear goals, and reassurance, yet transformation requires patience. Growth does not move in straight lines, it moves in cycles of construction and dissolution. When something inside you is changing, the old map no longer applies, and the new one has not yet been drawn. This in-between state can feel like stagnation, but it is actually a period of incubation. Energy that was once invested in maintaining outdated structures is being redirected inward, preparing for a new form of expression. Feeling lost also reveals the limits of control. Much of life is navigated through conscious planning, but the deepest shifts occur beyond deliberate effort. Inner transformation follows its own rhythm, guided by experiences, emotions, and insights that cannot be forced. When direction fades, it is often because life is asking you to listen rather than act, to observe rather than push forward. This listening allows subtle intuitions to emerge, pointing toward paths that align more closely with your inner truth. Rather than signaling failure, feeling lost indicates honesty. It means you are no longer pretending that what once worked still does. It reflects courage, even if it feels like weakness, because you are allowing uncertainty instead of clinging to false clarity. In time, this openness becomes the foundation for genuine direction. What eventually arises is not a return to the old path, but the formation of a new one that resonates more deeply with who you are now. Uncertainty is often experienced as a threat, because it removes the familiar markers that give the mind a sense of safety. When answers disappear and outcomes are unclear, anxiety arises, urging you to restore order as quickly as possible. Yet uncertainty serves a deeper function than mere discomfort. It suspends the rigid structures through which you once understood yourself and the world, creating an inner openness where deeper meaning can begin to reorganize. When certainty collapses, it reveals not emptiness but potential, a space where new patterns of understanding can form without being constrained by old assumptions. Much of what you believe about yourself is shaped by repetition and habit, rather than truth. Certainty reinforces these patterns, keeping identity stable but often stagnant. Uncertainty disrupts this stability, not to destroy it, but to loosen what has become fixed and lifeless. When familiar explanations no longer satisfy, the mind is forced to confront its limits. In this confrontation, awareness deepens. You begin to sense aspects of yourself that were previously overshadowed by routines, expectations, and conditioned beliefs. Meaning does not disappear in uncertainty. It withdraws from the surface so it can be restructured at a deeper level. The discomfort of uncertainty comes from the ego's need to control interpretation. It wants to define situations immediately, to label them as success or failure, right or wrong. But deeper meaning operates beyond these binaries. It emerges gradually through experience, reflection, and emotional integration. When you allow uncertainty without rushing to conclusions, you give inner processes time to unfold. What seems like confusion is often the psyche working to integrate conflicting insights into a more coherent whole. Periods of uncertainty often coincide with important transitions. Old goals lose their emotional charge, and new ones have not yet revealed themselves. This liminal state can feel directionless, but it is precisely here that inner realignment takes place. Without the pressure to act, attention turns inward. Subtle intuitions, values, and desires begin to surface, not as loud declarations, but as quiet inclinations. These signals are easy to miss if you fill the space with forced certainty or constant distraction. Uncertainty also teaches trust. Trust not in specific outcomes, but in the process of becoming. When you stop demanding immediate clarity, you allow life to reorganize meaning organically. This reorganization does not follow linear logic, it follows resonance. Over time, connections form between experiences that once seemed unrelated. Patterns reveal themselves, and what felt random begins to make sense in retrospect. Meaning appears not as something imposed, but as something discovered through lived experience. By remaining present within uncertainty, you develop a deeper relationship with yourself. You learn to tolerate not knowing without collapsing into fear. This tolerance strengthens inner stability, making you less dependent on external validation or predictable outcomes. In this way, uncertainty becomes a teacher rather than an enemy. It clears the ground for a more authentic understanding of who you are and what truly matters, allowing deeper meaning to reorganize itself from the inside out. Forcing clarity is often driven by fear rather than wisdom. When life becomes uncertain, the mind demands immediate answers, believing that clarity will restore safety and control. This urgency creates pressure to decide, define, and conclude before the inner process has fully unfolded. In doing so, you may mistake mental closure for true understanding. Life possesses a natural intelligence that moves through timing, experience, and gradual integration, And when you rush this process, you interfere with its organic rhythm. What appears as clarity achieved through force is often a temporary illusion that later collapses under the weight of unresolved truth. The mind prefers neat explanations because ambiguity feels threatening. Yet life rarely unfolds in straight lines or clear categories. Growth occurs through exploration, contradiction, and periods of confusion that cannot be bypassed without cost. When you insist on immediate clarity, you narrow your perception to what feels manageable, excluding insights that require patience to emerge. This narrowing limits awareness and disconnects you from deeper signals such as intuition, emotion, and subtle inner shifts. The natural intelligence of life communicates through these channels, not through rigid demands for certainty. Forcing clarity also leads to premature decisions. In moments of transition, emotions, values, and priorities are still reorganizing beneath the surface. Acting too quickly can lock you into paths that reflect fear rather than alignment. The need to figure it out becomes more important than allowing yourself to be shaped by experience. This creates inner conflict, as actions move ahead while understanding lags behind. Over time, this misalignment manifests as dissatisfaction, exhaustion, or the sense that something essential has been overlooked. Life's intelligence operates through timing. Just as seasons cannot be rushed without damaging growth, inner clarity unfolds when conditions are right. Silence, waiting, and reflection are not passive states, but active spaces where integration occurs. When you allow uncertainty to exist, you create room for unconscious material to surface and be processed. Memories, insights, and emotions begin to connect in ways the rational mind could not orchestrate on its own. This slow synthesis leads to clarity that is stable, embodied, and trustworthy. The urge to force clarity often masks a deeper fear of vulnerability. Not knowing exposes you to the possibility of failure, loss, or change beyond your control. Yet this exposure is precisely what allows life to guide you toward paths that resonate more deeply with who you are becoming. When you release the demand for immediate answers, you shift from control to cooperation. Instead of imposing meaning, you allow meaning to reveal itself through lived experience. True clarity does not arrive as a sudden mental conclusion, but as a quiet sense of alignment. It feels less like certainty and more like recognition. By respecting the natural intelligence of life and resisting the impulse to force understanding, you remain open to possibilities that logic alone could never predict. In this openness, life unfolds with greater coherence, and clarity arises not because it was demanded, but because it was allowed. Trust is often misunderstood as passive belief, as if it requires doing nothing and simply hoping that life will work itself out. In reality, true trust is an active surrender, a conscious participation in life without the illusion of total control. Passive belief waits for reassurance from outside, depending on circumstances to confirm safety. Active surrender, however, requires inner strength. It asks you to release the need to dictate outcomes while remaining fully present, attentive, and responsive to what life is asking of you in each moment. Active surrender begins with awareness. You recognize where effort has turned into resistance, where control has replaced understanding. This does not mean abandoning responsibility or intention. It means shifting how you engage with uncertainty. Instead of fighting what is unclear, you allow yourself to stand within it, observing your fears without letting them dominate your actions. In this state, trust becomes a dynamic process rather than a fixed belief. You listen, adjust, and move forward step by step, even without guarantees. Passive belief often seeks comfort, while active surrender seeks alignment. Belief alone can become a form of avoidance, a way to bypass discomfort by repeating affirmations or waiting for signs. Surrender, on the other hand, requires honesty. It demands that you face what is not working, accept what cannot be changed, and respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. This engagement with reality strengthens inner stability, making trust something you practice rather than something you declare. Active surrender also involves letting go of imagined timelines. The mind prefers predictability, measuring progress by external milestones. Life, however, unfolds according to rhythms that cannot always be anticipated. When you surrender actively, you remain committed to growth without insisting on when or how it must occur. You take meaningful action where possible and release attachment to specific results. This balance allows effort to coexist with acceptance, preventing burnout and frustration. Trust deepens. When you realize that surrender does not weaken you, it refines you. By releasing rigid expectations, you become more adaptable and perceptive. Opportunities that were invisible under the weight of control begin to appear. Intuition sharpens because attention is no longer consumed by anxiety about the future. You start responding to life with sensitivity rather than force, which aligns your actions with deeper values rather than momentary fears. In this way, trust becomes a lived experience. It is expressed through patience, discernment, and the courage to remain open when outcomes are uncertain. Active surrender acknowledges that while you cannot command life, you can cooperate with it. Through this cooperation, trust transforms from a passive idea into a STA. Inner posture, allowing life's intelligence to guide you while you continue to participate fully in your own becoming. Loss and delay are often interpreted as signs that life has taken something away or placed unnecessary obstacles in the way. The immediate reaction is to resist them, to view them as interruptions to progress or punishments for unseen mistakes. Yet beneath their surface discomfort, loss and delay serve a deeper purpose. They interrupt momentum that is no longer aligned and create a pause in which deeper truth can emerge. When something is removed or postponed, it is often because the direction you were moving in no longer reflects who you are becoming. Loss dismantles attachments that once provided identity or security. This dismantling feels painful because it exposes vulnerability and uncertainty. What is lost may be a relationship, an opportunity, a role, or a version of yourself that no longer fits. In the absence of what was familiar, you are forced to confront what remains. This confrontation strips life down to essentials, revealing values and desires that were previously obscured by comfort or routine. Loss clears emotional and psychological space, allowing you to see yourself without the filters of expectation or dependency. Delay functions in a similar way, though its lesson is often subtler. When progress slows or plans stall, frustration arises from the belief that time is being wasted. However, delay often protects you from moving forward prematurely. Inner development does not always match external timing, and when action outpaces understanding, misalignment occurs. Delay gives inner processes time to mature. It allows insight, resilience, and clarity to develop before the next step is taken. What feels like stagnation is frequently preparation taking place beneath awareness. Both loss and delay disrupt the illusion of control. They remind you that life cannot be fully managed through effort alone. This disruption invites a shift from force to listening. When the usual paths are blocked, attention naturally turns inward. You begin to notice patterns, intuitions, and long-ignored truths. In this quieter state, motivation becomes more authentic, no longer driven by fear of falling behind or desire for validation, but by a sense of inner resonance. Authentic direction emerges not from what you want to escape, but from what you feel drawn toward once distractions fall away. Loss removes what is no longer essential, and delay prevents you from settling too quickly for substitutes. Together, they refine intention. They encourage patience and honesty, qualities necessary for meaningful direction. Instead of chasing what once seemed necessary, you become more attuned to what feels genuinely aligned. Over time, what initially felt like deprivation reveals itself as guidance. The space created by loss and delay becomes fertile ground for insight and renewal. When movement resumes, it does so with greater coherence and deep purpose. The direction that emerges is not imposed by circumstance or expectation, but shaped by a deeper understanding of self. In this way, loss and delay do not hinder progress. They quietly redirect it toward a path that is more truthful, sustainable, and aligned with who you truly are. Clarity is often pursued through external control, through planning, organizing, and attempting to manage every possible outcome. When uncertainty arises, the instinct is to tighten control, believing that more effort, more information, or more certainty will restore direction. Yet this approach often leads to exhaustion rather than understanding. True clarity does not emerge from forcing life into predictable patterns. It arises when inner alignment is restored. Without this alignment, even the most carefully constructed plans feel empty or unstable. Inner alignment begins with listening rather than directing. It requires attention to inner signals such as emotion, intuition, and bodily response, which are often ignored in the pursuit of control. These signals carry information about what resonates and what does not. When actions are taken in contradiction to these inner cues, confusion deepens, regardless of how logical the decision appears. Clarity fades not because answers are unavailable, but because attention is misdirected toward external management instead of internal coherence. External control seeks certainty in outcomes, while inner alignment seeks consistency between values, actions, and inner truth. When these elements are misaligned, no amount of external success can compensate for the resulting unease. You may achieve goals yet feel disconnected or restless, sensing that something essential is missing. This discomfort is not failure, it is feedback. It indicates that the path being followed does not reflect your deeper orientation. Clarity returns when you respond to this feedback with honesty rather than suppression. Inner alignment is not achieved through sudden insight, but through ongoing self-attunement. It develops as you allow yourself to pause, reflect, and reassess without judgment. In this process, priorities shift naturally. What once felt urgent may lose importance, while neglected aspects of life demand attention. As alignment strengthens, decisions require less force. Choices feel more intuitive, guided by an internal sense of rightness rather than external pressure or fear of loss. The illusion of control creates rigidity. It narrows perception and limits responsiveness, making it difficult to adapt when circumstances change. Inner alignment, by contrast, increases flexibility. When you are grounded in your inner truth, external change does not destabilize you as easily. You remain open to adjustment because your sense of direction is rooted internally rather than dependent on fixed conditions. This stability allows clarity to persist, even when the future remains uncertain. As inner alignment deepens, clarity returns quietly. It does not announce itself through dramatic certainty, but through a calm confidence in each step taken. You no longer need to control every detail because trust has replaced compulsion. Actions flow from understanding rather than fear, and direction feels less like a rigid plan and more like a living process. In this way, clarity is not something you impose on life. It is something that emerges naturally when your inner world is brought into harmony with your outer choices. And so when you feel lost, uncertain, or delayed, remember that nothing within you is broken. What feels like confusion is often realignment in motion. Life withdraws clarity not to punish you, but to draw you inward where deeper truth is formed. When you stop forcing answers and begin listening, direction slowly reveals itself. Trust is not about knowing where the path leads, but about walking it with honesty and presence. In allowing life to shape you rather than resisting it, you discover that clarity was never outside of you. It was waiting for you to become still enough to recognize it.